It's a great honor to be with you. I've heard about Mobius for a long time. I have really enjoyed the exchange with these guys that I've had. And I've also been very interested in bringing IFS out of the therapy office more into the culture and also into the corporate world, because I think that's where the culture gets influenced the most. So the biggest bang for our buck is if we can bring what I call self-leadership to that arena. So how many of you already know something about IFS? Okay, oh, great, okay. How many of you are multiple personalities? Wow, that's the best I've ever done with that question, actually. I don't mean how many of you have multiple personality disorder, but how many have never had this experience? You're in an intimate relationship, you get into conflict, and you find yourself doing and saying things you know are making it worse, and you can't stop yourself. Anybody never have that experience? And the next day you say, who was that? Who took over my bus and drove it off the cliff last night? And that's a good question. That's some of what I'm going to be talking about today, because I guarantee you that if you were to take a second and focus on that anger inside of you and find it in your body, because you can do that, and then get curious. Mindfulness is very hot now, so just get into a kind of mindfully curious place about it and ask it some questions. You would learn that it's not just a bundle of anger, that in fact it has fear, it has other emotions, and it's protecting other parts of you that are very vulnerable and are stuck in bad places in your life. And it's sort of stuck back there too, and it doesn't really even know how old you are at this point. Now that all sounds a bit bizarre to some of you probably, but that was my experience years and years ago. Just a little bit of my background. So I'm trained as a family therapist. I didn't know from parts. I thought the mind was just this unitary mind that had thoughts and emotions. The big distinction that leaped out was between parts that are very, very vulnerable, easily hurt, and then the parts that protect them. So we have protectors, and then we have these very vulnerable parts. So I'm going to start with the vulnerable ones. How many of you have never been humiliated in your life? How about in the last week? So when you had that humiliating experience, what did you try to do with the memories, sensations, emotions, and beliefs that came into you from that? Just call it out. Deny, forget, judge yourself about it, right? Say? Suppress, push it away. Right, so most of us do some version of that. What did the people around you tell you to do with it? Forget about it. Yeah. Let it go. Don't be so sensitive. Just move on. Don't look back. And the business world is really ripe with that message. So I'd be a big advocate of that approach if it worked, but it turns out that you're not just, my language, exiling emotions, sensations, memories, and beliefs. You are locking up inside of you the parts of you that were most hurt by those experiences. And those tend to be your most sensitive parts, who are also, when they're not hurt, your most playful, joyful, creative, spontaneous, fun-loving, intimacy-seeking parts. They're your juice, these inner children. But because they're hurt now, you don't want anything to do with them. They're like radioactive to you. And so you lock them in inner abysses or cysts or caverns and try to forget about them. So for them, it's insult to injury. The injury was getting hurt, initially humiliated, and the insult is you abandoning them and locking them up. And everybody in this room has a bunch of exiles. These we call exiles. Once you get some exiles, then the world is a lot more difficult, because the world has a way to trigger those parts. And when they get triggered, it's like these flames of emotion threaten to consume you. And you won't be able to function, you'll feel vulnerable, you won't be able to be in the business world for sure. So we have other parts whose job it is to prevent that from happening at whatever cost. And their job is to manage your life so nothing similar to the original humiliation ever happens again. And they'll manage your relationships, they'll manage your appearance, they'll try to manage your performance. And they're working constantly. When you walked in the door, they would scan for danger. They're just constantly feeding you information. So we call them the managers. This is one class of protector. They all have in common the desire to preempt anything that might trigger these exiles. And often are trying to please people, and often are pretty cerebral, and they often are the critics. Many of them are forced into that role of criticizing you to try to motivate you to do better, to work harder, to look better. Or they're criticizing you to make you small so you don't take risks, so you don't get out there and get hurt again. But they're all desperately trying to protect you, even though they're tearing into you.